Yeah, as I just said, the purpose of this meeting is basically to share my experience with Rubocop i18n and to discuss how we can move forward with the internationalization of the Rails code base. So based on Luke's initial proposal, I used the Rubocop i18n in one of my MRs, which I have linked in the agenda. To document and to detect untranslated strings in Ruby files. And when I initially enabled it a few weeks ago, and like 11.10 or before 11.10, and back then we had almost 2,000 offenses in our code base. So I tried to reduce this number by opening smaller MRs over the last couple of weeks, and externalized a bunch of strings and added a few exclude rules. So thanks again, Bob, for helping me with identifying all the folders that we can add to the exclude rules. And I think today we have less than 100 offenses in CE and about 180 offenses in EE. So I'm still working on getting those numbers down to 0 eventually in this milestone. In my opinion,
it's important to note that this only includes Ruby files, not the templates and the front-end files and the Vue files.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really just about the Ruby code base. So no Vue components are touched. There's no Haml templates that are used in the linters. So it's just the Ruby code base.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Could we include the Haml files, because those are Ruby as well, into the Rubocop linting? Because we already have, help me Dennis, what's the name, Haml lint?
Yeah, so we have Haml lint, and Luke is actually going to be looking into that this week and next. So we can kind of bring Haml into the fold in terms of what we're checking. And then I was just going to quickly provide an update. So that was part of the update, but also for the front end side of things, Brandon's been working on the ESLint for the vanilla JavaScript files, and he's close to having a plugin that's detecting most of what we'll need. I don't know if it's going to be 100% conclusive, but I think we have the same concerns across the board. And then the ESLint for Vue will be heavily based off of that. I'm curious, actually. I mean, we could probably do the same amount of checking or extend that plugin just to be able to check for templates, for Vue templates and strings there. So overall, we're making some good progress, at least as far as detecting and perhaps auto-fixing some of it.
So we have a separate tool for linting the Haml templates?
Yeah, it's Haml lint, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, so basically my resume is that Rubocop is quite a good tool to detect like basic offenses in our code base.
I think Martin died.
Yeah, Martin froze, or the AI is stuck.
But I think I can.
Okay, you're back now. Sorry, Martin.
I'm back. It's probably my Wi-Fi. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So what I just said is, in my opinion, Rubocop is a great way to start working on detecting offenses in the code base. However, there are several cases that couldn't be detected by Rubocop, and this is where I would love to hear your thoughts today. For example, I listed a few of those things that couldn't be detected by Rubocop. For example, like strings without a trailing dot or a trailing exclamation mark couldn't be detected. Individual words that we have like a bunch of those cases in split sentences, for example. Also strings that don't start with a capital letter. For example, again, in split sentences, or we use it on label and on placeholders. So there's a lot of those cases that could not be detected. And I was wondering how we want to proceed and how we can make sure that if there's any way to automate linting for those cases as well, or if we really need to go over it and fix or identify those cases manually.
Do you
There's
know if there are specific reasons why it doesn't lint for some of those cases? Is it a challenging technical issue to do so, for example?
Well, there's the first 3 points, like strings without a trailing dot, stuff like that, individual words, and strings that don't start with a capital letter. They are actually marked as known issues on the Rubocop plugin or on the Rubocop page
on
itself.
the other hand, I can think of use cases where that would be valid. For example, drop downs you wouldn't want punctuation in drop downs, for example. So I don't think that's something we need to detect there. I think that's something that's part of code review, just like we do for grammar rules and so on in English.
Yeah, I think we should definitely enforce these kind of things in reviews. But on the other hand, we still need a way, ideally, to automate finding those offenses, because we can do it manually, right? But it's a lot of work to go over the entire code base and find those occurrences.
I think the start with Rubocop i18n, detecting when we don't externalize a string and explicitly marking as I made the conscious decision of not externalizing the string and argue, like being able to tell why, that's a huge step already for our code base, because we won't have strings sneaking in that aren't externalized that we need to pick up later. We have several rules for the both the translations as the externalized strings that are being linted in a static analysis. If you run the task locally, rake getText lint, that will go through all of the strings in each language to see if the variables are used correctly, to see if variables are missing. That stuff is there already. It also detects if you forgot to check in the changes to the gitlab.pot file. I think that's a pretty good start already. The thing that I would argue prioritizing is automation of stuff. Being right now the merging of translations coming in from Crowdin. Crowdin creates a merge request, but there's still some confidential issues open. I've linked them in the documents under open topics. Those things are all manual, and therefore likely that we make a mistake. There's some suggestions there about what we could do about it. There's also a lot of translations that get approved that are not complete, or they are missing variables, or they are like just obviously incorrect or invalid. We lint for those, so they never get into our code base, but we need to, like, what happens when I merge translation is I pull that in, I run the CI, see the errors, go into Crowdin, comment, this is broken, and unapprove the translation. We need to automate that. Crowdin has an API. We've just never gotten around to that. I think those things are more important to keep our i18n stuff sane, honestly. The thing that you did now, like forcing people to externalize new things, that's the most important. But since we've got that covered, I would argue automation.
Right. Yeah. So do you and regarding all the cases that still need translation but couldn't be detected so far by running our static analysis with Rubocop, do you think we should just cover these or externalize those cases or handle those cases manually as we go?
What cases? Because Rubocop now does all the backend code, and Dennis is working on Dennis's team is working on the front end code, so the view and the Hamel templates.
Yeah, but Rubocop is, that's what I mean. Rubocop is not really doing all the backend code, right? There's still a bunch of strings that couldn't be detected. That's what I meant. Like, for example, if you have split sentences and then there's no trailing exclamation mark or whatever, Rubocop would not detect those cases. It wouldn't say, okay, there's a translation missing. It would just ignore this string. It wouldn't mark it as an offense. That's the problem I see with the current state. And
go ahead.
I'm not sure I fully understand. You mean a string doesn't get picked up as it needs to be translated if you have an exclamation mark at the end?
If you don't have, so for example, if I say, hi, my name is Martin, and I don't have a trailing dot, a trailing exclamation mark, a trailing question mark, Rubocop would not really detect it for some reason. And that's also listed on the Rubocop plugin page. And the same goes for if you have an individual word or like two words, for example. If you just say, I don't know, succeed or success or whatever, then this would not be detected by Rubocop as marked as translation, which is a big issue in my opinion, because we have a lot of those cases that don't have trailing dots, question marks, or whatever.
You mean that the string, like, would Rubocop enforce you to wrap it in one of the?
No, it would
really
not.
Weird.
It's not. It is. Yeah, I think that the rules that Rubocop provides are super basic in some cases. So I also was surprised that in many cases it just wouldn't detect this is a string that needs to be externalized, because it was just missing a dot at the end. If you would add the dot, it would just simply say, okay, now I found a missing translation.
So I think the decision we'll have to make is to determine like the level of effort to be able to detect those things like that. And if it's a known issue and it's been like that for a while now, then I'm not sure if it's really worth pursuing, because I think at one point, and sorry for the noise, but if we kind of think about the whole 80-20 rule, and at least we're able to catch most of the offenses, and then we're going to have to manually go through most of these files anyways, and probably like just do a sanity check manually to make sure everything that should have been detected or hasn't been detected for whatever reason can be translated, then I think that's good enough. And then at least going forward, we have all of these new changes coming in that we can easily identify as whether or not they need to be translated or not. And the linchers can help with that. I'm just, if it takes a lot of effort to be able to detect, with or without the punctuation, then I'm not sure how much time we really want to spend on that or invest into that.
Yeah, so I just linked it for I just linked the list of ignored cases from the Rubocop corp. So there's like those three cases that are listed are super important in my opinion, because that happens all the time. And if Rubocop doesn't detect those cases, I think we need to look for alternatives as well, or think about other ways to detect those cases.
I don't know if they did that as a conscious decision, as we're not going to detect that. If not, then we could contribute the fix, because the Rubocop syntax thing is undocumented but quite good. So we have cops already for our own. We could extend it for our code base, see if it works, and if it works, contribute back.
Yeah, I think it's not. It looks to me that they did this decision on purpose, because it's listed under the ignored section, and it's not part of the known issues section. So it seems that they did it on purpose.
Yeah, it's definitely documented in the README as almost like expected behavior. But I don't know if this is the point that Luke's just put in the chat. They tend to provide very simple rules for internationalization because it's so fast. I know also that a lot of linters have kind of customization, so I don't know whether we could maybe contribute something to make it an option to pick up on kind of non-perfect sentences, if you will.
Yeah. Okay.
Is someone willing to dig into that to see if it's like, I guess, assess the level of effort to try to do that, and then see if that's a viable option?
Or just extending with our own local cops. Martin, I see you're writing that down.
Yeah. I'm just taking some notes here. Okay.
I think having something like Rubocop in that's going to detect a lot of translations already gives us something to point at when somebody is introducing translations, to say like, now is the moment that you need to externalize everything you add. That, like, because sometimes people would say like this entire page isn't translated. If we have one sentence inside that's translated, then it would look weird. But right now we're at the point like everything that goes in needs to be translated.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so, just so I understand completely, Rubocop is detecting, but it's not auto-fixing, right?
It has some autofix rules, but they're very limited, and you can, well, basically it provides 5 or 6 different corps.
Mm-hmm.
And auto fixing is only enabled for one of the 5 corps, I think, and
Okay.
that's the corp that we are actually not interested in, because it's about detecting mostly translations in race statements, for example, and that's the only thing that Rubocop is able to auto-fix. But I think Luke started to implement auto-fixing rules on his local machine, and I'm not sure how far he got, but I think he mentioned that he played around with it for a little bit. So I'm not sure if it's how easy you can extend those auto-fixing rules.
Yeah, if it's not already kind of coming with it stock, then we can just have it as a follow-up later. As long as the linting's there, then that's a good start, I would say.
Yeah. And then I think we are almost running out of time. The other open topics that I think we should discuss is there's other cases in related to translations, like for example, I'm also not quite sure how to deal with stuff like and humanize, pluralize, dot to sentence, and that sort of things. Do you know, maybe Bob, you mentioned that, I remember in one of my MRs you mentioned that humanize is something that we really need to fix case by case, probably, because there's like no automatism that we can use.
Yeah, you like humanize, it's a Rails thing that just turns a model name into something
Right.
human, but only in English.
In English, yeah.
I think at some point we're going to have to say we're going to have to add a cop ourselves that just disallows use of that method.
Exactly, but maybe we should just open an issue for those cases, like a follow-up issue. I think it's not super high priority. It's just something that eventually, if we want to get to 100% translations, then we need to cover these cases as well.
Cool.
Okay, so the takeaways, I guess, for the most important part is to see if we can contribute to Rubocop to cover those missed cases, the 3 mentioned ignored cases, and then see if we can also extend autofix capabilities at some point.
One more thing that I wanted to bring up, lots of the things that we use, like device, some time helpers and so on, they provide, there's what is it, the Rails i18n gem that includes a bunch, and then device i18n and so on. I think we should just include those gems so we have translations for them, and then those are the things that can still use the regular Rails translations over the getText ones, so the YAML files that are inside those gems. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I understand.
So lots of the gems that we use the default Rails. I don't even remember what the method is. The T method that's everywhere.
I see. Okay.
Those, like you provide a YAML file with the key, and it's like a drill down thing. So you have I don't know, device.login failed as a key. So in the YAML file you would have device, and then under that login failed, and then the sentence. And there's a gem, like gems for several of those, for carrier wave, for device, for all of these error messages and stuff that are like just provide translations. And I think if we use those, then we can keep them up to date as well when Rails updates, and we don't need to provide our custom keys for everything. That's why I would argue including those gems.
Do those get fed into Crowdin though? I mean, to be translated, or what happens with
they
those?
don't. So they're just translated by the open source community that uses them.
I see. So you're saying we wouldn't like rewrap them again? Is that what you're saying? Just to
I would use them out of the box.
Okay, got it.
Okay, I think
to the docs for that.
I think the last point on the agenda was the danger job. I think you're right, Bob. Basically, that's already. I think danger job was just something in the beginning that we thought about it, but it's since Rubocop, it's already being covered in as part of the static analysis now. So I think we don't really need a danger job anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's not necessary anymore.
Yeah, I think Rubocop, Hamlint, and ESLint are already kind of incorporated, so they should show up in whatever reports they're already a part of.
Right. But I think we can probably close this issue that I linked.
Cool.
Yeah, let's.
Okay. Anything else from your side? Okay. Cool. Well, thanks a lot. And let's see how far we get until the end of the milestone.
Cool. Thanks for putting this meeting together, Martin.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.